Today guys, I'm going to be going over gutting your 350Z for track usage. This will be a guide. Obviously my car is already gutted, you can see that pretty clearly, but I'm going to be giving you pointers and things that I learned along the way, just things to look out for so that you know what's on the other side of whatever you're about to cut or things like that, just to make it a little bit easier for you. First and foremost, let me say that if you are considering gutting your interior even to the smallest amount, it is only worth it if your car is a track-only vehicle. If you are daily driving it almost at all, I wouldn't recommend gutting the interior because the small amount of gains you're going to get from losing the weight that you're going to lose is really not worth the amount of added NVH you're going to have. So like removing some of the plastics back here, you're only going to lose a few pounds and it's going to make the car a lot less enjoyable to drive on a day-to-day basis. So just trust me, if you're going to gut it, go all out, 100% or nothing. Don't really do any in between unless it is only a weekend car or something like that. But you really want to lean more towards track-only duty if you're going to do something especially as serious as this, because at this point, this car is miserable to drive on the street. So the thing that looks most different about my car compared to a stock 350Z is definitely this little center section here that houses things like your glove box and your speakers and nav system. All of that, you can cut that out. You can see right here where it connected along this little wall here. The way that I did this was I cut it out in sections. I just cut whatever I possibly could to move things out of the way. You can get a 12-inch long Sawzall blade, and that made it really easy if I couldn't quite get the Sawzall in there. And then once I got all the way up to the wall, I could use a Sawzall where I curve the blade a little bit, or I could use an angle grinder. You can drill out all of these rivets and then try and get it out with like an air chisel. But for me, that last little tiny bit of metal just wasn't worth the extra effort. It was going to be a lot of effort for a very small amount of weight. But removing this is definitely worth it. I see a lot of people who gut their cars and say, oh, I'm going to leave this and cage around it. No, get it out of there, cut it out, especially because this bolt-in cage is down here. But once I go to a full weld-in cage that's going to be 6, 8, 10 points, I'm going to move the pickup point from down right behind the seats up to on this little shelf here. A, because I can move the seat further back, and B, I just think that's a better spot to put it. So by leaving that in, you're really compromising your ability to do a proper cage, and you're compromising the amount of room you have in the car. Some people will say that it's there to stiffen the chassis. Number one, no it's not. And number two, even if it was, adding the cage into the interior is going to make up a lot for any little bit of rigidity that's lost from that, what is essentially a large speaker box. For the back of the car, it's really straightforward. Just remove all of the plastics and all the things that go along with the spare tire, tools, things like that. By making yourself some room, you have room to do things like adding ballast back here. I've got my battery over here in the corner. I've got a video on that. I have videos specifically on gutting the door, gutting the hatch, gutting the hood, and a few other things like how to make a plexiglass window. Those are all in the same playlist that this is in. It's going to be DIY weight reduction. But gutting the hatch is definitely something I would say is worth it. So you can see I have removed a lot of material, and that has reduced some weight. But one thing you want to always keep in mind on this car is it is front heavy. So in stock form, you're looking at about 53 to 54% front weight bias. So by removing all of this weight back here, you're going to have to compensate in the front of the car. Otherwise, you're going to make a car that handles worse. So it may be faster in a straight line once it has traction, but you want to keep that weight distribution as close to 50-50 as you possibly can. So that's why I've got ballast added in the back here, because I know that I've got a weight limit that I'm trying to get as close to, and by adding the weight in the back, I'm getting closer to that weight limit while also improving the handling of the car. So the more weight you remove in the front, the more weight you can try to push towards the rear to gain that balance back. And you can put that weight somewhere that you actually want it. So yes, this little 35-pound weight over here could compensate for this middle section, but now all the weight is on the passenger side of the car instead of across the whole width of the car. The more weight you remove, the more you can put it back where you need it. But the back half of the car is pretty simple. Just remove everything in sight. You know, the only difficult part is cutting out that middle section. The rest of it comes out pretty easily. Unfortunately, there is not a whole lot you can do under the hood as far as moving weight towards the back once you move the battery. So once the battery's out of the way and back in the trunk, you can move a few things into its place, which of course is moving it a couple feet back, but it's not a huge difference. The battery is the big difference maker. After that, the only thing you can do is work on the accessories up front. So deleting your AC, deleting your power steering, simplifying all of your pulleys, removing tensioners, things like that. That's really the only place you're going to lose weight. Now, of course, headers weigh a little bit less than the stock manifolds, downpipes weigh less than cats, but it's not a huge difference. But when you're getting rid of things like your AC compressor, that does take a lot of weight off the front of the car. But beyond that, there really isn't a whole lot you can do up here to easily remove some weight. I did get rid of this back panel back here. This wasn't so much for weight as it was just to make things more simple, but it did save a little bit of weight. But of course, plastic does not weigh a whole lot to begin with, so there wasn't a ton of savings there. One thing you can do that a lot of people overlook is doing a wiring tuck and moving the wires towards the back of the engine compartment. Number one is saving you weight because any wires that you're not using anymore, so for example, you delete the AC, get rid of the AC switch, get rid of all that wiring all the way back to the ECU and depin it, and you're saving weight. Wiring does have a lot of weight to it, and we'll get to that more in the interior. But moving wiring in the engine compartment towards the back is going to help a little bit, and getting rid of all of the extra brackets that Nissans use. As you can see, my engine bay is pretty sparse, so there are a lot of extra brackets and bolts and different things throughout the engine bay. And when you get to more of a track-focused vehicle, you don't need any more. So anything that you don't need and you're no longer using, get rid of it. You'd be surprised once you add it all up how much weight you've actually removed from the vehicle if you do it from bumper to bumper. Once we get to the passenger area, one of the easiest ways to lose weight is A, getting rid of your passenger seat, but B, also changing the driver's seat out to a racing seat. It'll be much safer for you, and it'll save you a ton of weight. Another section that's a little bit less overlooked because it is very tedious is dealing with the dash. So even though the dash on these cars is actually pretty light because most of it's made out of plastic, even though a composite dash is much lighter, like that up here, there are a lot of components behind your dash that are very heavy. So you have an airbag on the passenger side, of course the airbag in the driver's steering wheel, but you have all the components for your AC system. So you've got a blower, you've got a heat exchanger in there, you've got a bunch of different wiring that you want to get rid of because, like I said, wiring is very heavy. If I pan down, you can see I've got the interior wiring just on this side of the trans tunnel, and the reason for that is it was running over here on the driver's side next to my feet, and I brought it over here so it's running down the middle of the car now because while it doesn't have a whole lot of weight, all of this adds up. So the wiring for the batteries over here on the passenger side, all of the main loom goes down the middle. I've got everything as far over as I possibly can to try and balance my weight. Now, one of the things you do not want to touch in the dash is there is an opaque white plastic box that is connected to the little AC controls that are down here, the 3 little AC controls. It's connected directly to that. That controls your gauges and it controls your AC system. Now, the reason you want to keep that is twofold. Number one, like I said, it controls your gauges. You unplug it, your gauges go off. But number two, when you keep it plugged in, you also want to keep those 3 little dials for all of your AC because you need to be able to plug that in to that white box and turn your blower motor all the way down. Otherwise, they can't tune your car. So if you do not have that little white box and you do not have those 3 little controls, you're not going to be able to get your car tuned because the AC defaults to full blast. So even though you've removed everything, the car's ECU thinks the AC is on full blast and it will not let them tune the car. Ask me how I know. But beyond moving wiring around, doing the seats and the dash, this section is pretty much the exact same as the trunk section of the car. All you want to do is just remove as much as you possibly can, and that's where you're going to get all of your weight savings from. I definitely think it is a worthwhile endeavor to strip out the car if it is a track-only vehicle, because removing all of this weight is going to help everything. It's going to help the car handle better. It's going to help the car brake better. It's going to help the car accelerate better. It's going to do everything better because it's less weight that is having to carry around, change direction, slow down, all of these things. Like I said in that playlist, I've got a video on talking about gutting the door. There's still 50 pounds in that door left. left. So there's going to be a lot of weight left on the car. To give you an idea, as stripped out as my car is, and as to the nth degree as I have gone on everything I possibly can, it still weighs 2,715 pounds as a curb weight with no ballast in the back. Still a very heavy car for a track vehicle, but it is so much lighter than a stock 350Z. But other than that little white box you have to keep and the little controls for the AC, there's really no other, big things you have to keep or worry about or things you got to look out for. Just take your time when you're cutting things. Check behind them as best you can. Make sure your battery's disconnected. So if you do cut through a wire, you can just go back and connect it back up. You're not going to cause any sort of fire or electrocute yourself or something like that. Oh, one thing that you really want to do, I almost forgot, is sound deadening. You're going to have sound deadening all throughout this car, and the best way that I found to get rid of it, and it is no secret, is dry ice. You can go buy dry ice at Publix. I think you have to be 18 to do it, maybe 16, but it's not very expensive. There's a ton of videos showing you how to use dry ice. Just, sit it on there, let it sit for a little while, and then hit it with a hammer and it pops right off. It works extremely well, and you will save a lot of weight because there is a lot of sound deadening in this car. But other than that, there's really no rocket science to it. I think this is so worth it, like I said, and the fact that it's free. It's just your labor, your time, and some pretty simple tools that you probably have, like a Sawzall, cut-off blade, hammer, a screwdriver, some chisels. It's not a super complicated process. It just takes a lot of time. And one thing to keep in mind is if you take these things out gently, you can sell them. So be careful. Somebody somewhere who has a street car probably needs it. So take your time, don't chop all this stuff up, and you can sell it on eBay and make a decent amount of money. I also have a video I can link for that. So of course, if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to drop those below. You can hit me up on Instagram. But other than that, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week.